January 21st meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee to order. Mr. Weinreich and Ms. Dole, was there a proof of notification?
Yes, it was, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 3, agenda of. So we've got a 13-point agenda today. Is there a motion to approve?
Move for approval.
A motion by Brewer,
I'll second.
second by Turk. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. And so it sounds like Supervisor Luck, are you on the phone?
I am on the phone, yep.
Excellent. Okay, so we've got 6 out of 7 people here today, so we do have a quorum.
I'm here.
Yes, great. We got 3 of us online and 3 of us in the county boardroom. Agenda item number 4, previous meeting minutes. Would you like to make the motion to approve then? Okay, motion by Gentis.
I'll second.
Second by Brewer. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor of approving those, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. We have approved minutes. Agenda item number 5, amended ARPA authorization for JAMF Pro subscription.
Mr. Chair, looking today for motion to increase purchase of the JAMF licensing purchasing amount and consider data policy and content filtering. In April of 2021, the Finance Personnel Committee approved MIS to purchase JAMF at the cost of $3,318. The purchase was not ultimately made as it was realized that there was not going to be room in the 2021 budget for the purchase. Now we're in the 2022 and the purchase needs to be made. Since the initial quote we had added significant to our number of Apple devices, and now instead of needing 50 licenses, we need 100, thus the increase in the cost. The current quote for 100 license and setup is $4,680.25. Number of devices are listed in the sheet that was attached in your folders. The second consideration of this is a possible purchase of the data policy and content filtering. Currently, we cannot content filter on mobile devices. There may be need to do this and required for cybersecurity insurance in the future. This would be an additional $5,902. We do have Director Scott here to help depict and describe this in addition. Thank you.
Okay, so any questions on this one?
Didn't we do this last year, Bud?
We did authorize the purchase of 50 JAMF licenses, you are correct. But at that point, we weren't, 2 things. We didn't have the ARPA funds, so we were suggesting to use it out of the MIS funds. When I got to the point of purchase, there wasn't going to be enough funds to actually do that and the other requirements of the budget. So I chose not to implement this. So when we got to 2022 budget and I went to implement and I counted the number of iPads and iPhones, which have increased exponentially over the last year, it was realized we need 100. We actually have 100 devices that need to be entered on this, so literally double the number, and that amount wasn't authorized. That's why it's back before you. The other part of this is we would be asking to use ARPA funds instead of MIS budget funds, and I need your consideration on the content filtering. That was never brought before you.
And so there's kind of 2 different, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Langer.
2 different aspects to it. Again, it's the licensing and the filtering. Both are on contracts. It's important to understand, though, that we didn't incorporate into the budget this year looking to use ARPA type of funds. But like our purchases, this is going to increase the ceiling. We're going to have to figure in future years how to fit this expense then into operational type funds. Some of the catalysts that brought a need for this is, as Barb mentioned, an increase in devices, but then also tracking for them. We did have, correct me if I'm wrong, an incident where we were looking to do open records request on documents or messaging that was sent on a device. Without having this in place, we weren't able to track and monitor it to be able to confirm or deny different allegations and conversations that were had. Is that correct, Barb?
That's correct. We couldn't protect our employee of what was not sent.
Okay, so it looks like we could handle this in two parts. The first part would be, we'd be looking for a motion to approve the expense of $4,680 and change using ARPA funds. That sounds like the thing that's got a stronger recommendation behind it from staff.
I'd make that motion.
Okay, motion by
Mr.
Turk.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, would someone turn up the volume?
I can do that.
Yes. We will
Thank
do
you.
that. Let us know if it doesn't help.
Thank you.
Okay, we got a motion by Turk. Is there a second?
I'll
Motion
second
by-
the motion.
We'll do a second by Seep this time. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. So that expense is approved using ARPA funds. And then if anyone wants to make a motion on the second one, this is the optional one. Or maybe that's not the word that was stated here. The second consideration would be the $5,092. And this would also be using ARPA funds.
Again, the difference with this part of the filtration is this is going to allow us to control devices on what is being searched for, different contents that is being browsed on. It helps with our security for our devices. It also helps control the use of the devices. Is there anything more that needs to be said about that, Director Scott?
At this point, the recommendation from the company, of course, was to purchase this to protect our users, because what their experience has been is, and this is just an example, we have not had this happen, but if you have an overnight officer and he is sitting alongside the road doing his paperwork, he is performing a function he can do in a squad car. They are data enabled. You may have a citizen's purview that says, well, he's sitting alongside of the road watching YouTube videos all night. We will have no way to argue that. We do not believe at any point that any of our officers are doing that, and it would be a way to protect them. The other thing that this does is it wouldn't allow them to go to sites that would be able to bring in damaging materials such as hack sites. We have this on our internal network. With the Barracuda, this would extend it to the external devices.
Ms. Gentis, just make sure to speak into the mic.
It is, in a sense, a type of
Can you
firewall.
just
It's
can you
filtering.
Yeah, can you repeat that?
A firewall outside. It's more of a filtering outside, but it also captures the web traffic, which we do inside, that protects our employees. It would also do that piece.
Okay, so the difference here is we have computers inside the courthouse, inside our other county buildings, but this would protect our devices that are mobile devices that people use out in the field.
Correct.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, they're all computers. Even though we think of them as telephones, they're not. They're computers.
okay, so does anyone want to make a motion to approve this?
Move a question.
Yep, go ahead.
So the purpose of this is to create a firewall, but also to monitor or record all the activity on these computers for the sake of protecting risk. Is that right?
We don't monitor, we don't record it unless there is a need to. We have the capability to do it, but we don't do it routinely.
All right. So that your example of the patrolman sitting along the road and having an accusation made against him about watching YouTube videos, the purpose of this would be to defend himself against that accusation.
That's correct. That is a use of this.
All right.
I'll move purchases.
Okay, we got a motion by Gentis,
I'll second.
second by Turk. Any further
I have a
discussion?
question.
Yep, go ahead.
Barb, would this cover our county board iPads too?
Yes, it would cover those as well.
Very good, thank you. I think this is something we should do now and definitely need to build in as part of our ongoing costs with the future. Security of our IT networks are critical, and controlling those mobile devices as well as what's within the concrete walls of the county are critically important.
Okay, anyone else? All those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
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 Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item number 6, purchase of antivirus software license.
Mr. Chair, looking today for motion for paying for the Sophos Intercept X Advanced Endpoint and Server Protection for 3 years at a discounted 2-year rate. So essentially, we're going to get 3 buy 2, get the third one free. Richland County requires antivirus. This will be replacing our current antivirus with a more robust product that will better protect the county. The decision that will be before you today is how to pay for the costs. The quote of the is attached. It displays the 2 options. The 1 year at $13,000, the second year one at $26,000. The first decision is doing what we first decision in doing. We want to purchase the 1 year or the 3 year, and then how to pay for it. Recommendation brought forward today is to move forward with the 3-year purchase, and reaching out to departments is solicited to see if there was room in their operational budgets to absorb essentially what would be a ×2 cost. All the responses that I've gotten back thus far were in the affirmative of we can make this happen with the mindset that we're going to be saving dollars in the long run. A spreadsheet was attached by Director Scott showing all the different devices that we have on their account, the number of computers. I think it's roughly $80 to $90 a unit once it's broken down over a 3-year cost, if memory serves. And I will defer to Director Scott for any questions, Mr. Chair.
So where are you all recommending this gets paid for? Not following.
It would be dispersed amongst the departments as it historically has been. The question that went out to them was, because we didn't budget for essentially a 2-year expense, could they absorb having 2 years of expenditures fit into this upcoming year with the mindset that we're going to be saving a 3rd year. We'll get the 3rd year free. And the responses that I've got back have been in the affirmative so far.
Okay, got it. So we're looking for a motion to recommend paying for this antivirus software for 3 years at a discounted 2-year rate. This would be charged to each department.
Yes, it'll be distributed amongst department budgets.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to that effect.
More volume, please.
If I turn up anymore.
I think that's as high as we can go. Go ahead, Supervisor Luck.
I just said I would make that motion.
Okay, motion by Luck,
Second.
second by Seat. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, that carries unanimously. I think I heard everyone there. Great, so thank you. We got our MIS stuff done here.
Perhaps some people are not close enough to the mic.
Can you not hear me?
The volume sounds good on my end.
Sounds good here too.
Mr. Langreck has got a very nice radio voice, but his volume was low.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes, a little better.
Okay, we'll do our best here. So this takes us to agenda item number 7, state shared revenue. And I've got a little report to share with folks. I think my inspiration from this came from Supervisor Gentis. I know that she was interested in having further, I think, positions taken by the county board regarding state-related funding. So I've got a motion to forward to the strategic planning committee some language to go into the plan, and I can read through that here at the end. But I went to the strategic planning committee this week, and I think they're open to having some additional language come from this committee. So shared revenues, sometimes it also gets called state aid, or sometimes it gets called, I think, general shared revenue. It's been falling for over 20 years. So I did a little history research. There's a report that's footnoted here. This was put in place in the early 1900s when the state started its income tax, so that some of that income tax would come back to the place where people actually lived, where they paid the income tax. So it's morphed over the years into many different things, and that report gives you way more detail than you'd probably ever want to know. I definitely didn't read it all. But in 2001, we received 1.36 million, and this was not tied to any specific department. We could spend it on general government activity. So it could go to Sheriff's Department, Highway, Health and Human Services, anywhere we wanted. In 2021, that share had dropped to 1.22 million, or a drop of 12%. So what I did in attachment A is I took the consumer price index and I figured out if inflation were figured in, what would we be getting today if it was in those 2001 dollars of 1.36 million. So the chart, the first chart just shows the blue line. It shows the drop, the 12% drop. And then the second page, it's got the green line and the red line. The red line is dashed. That dashed red line shows what we've actually gotten. The green line shows what we would have gotten if we would have followed inflation. And of course, in 2022, we're probably going to see a big bump in inflation. So we're probably going to be up to 2.2 million, almost a million. We're almost getting a million under of what we would have gotten if they would have kept up with inflation. So there's a chart on page 3, and that just shows all the background information. And by the way, I didn't put this on anything, but I got the state shared revenues from the Department of Revenue, the State Department of Revenue, through 2019, and then Clerk Kalish gave me the figures for 2020, 2021, and 2022. So, going back to the report here, so there's the cover sheet rather. There's a 2013 report from the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance, and it shows that the reduction in shared revenue along with that has come with counties increasingly relying on property taxes and fees. So that's an attachment B. Between 1995 and 2011, revenues from state aid dropped from 42% to 29% as a share of total county general revenues. And then in the meantime, property taxes increased from 32% to 38%, and fees increased from 10% to 16% as a total share of revenue. So I wasn't able to figure out where exactly all our revenues coming from. That's a little bit beyond my pay grade here on the county board. But I was able to pull from that Department of Revenue data some information, and that's shown in attachment C. So if you go to that chart, it's a little more multicolored. It's got 4 different colored lines. The orange line, second from the bottom, that shows the state shared revenue that we were just talking about. The gray line further below that, that's state highway aid. And that's not related to the state highways. That's more related to the county highways that we take care of. That's also been dropping. So from 750 grand roughly to 575 grand roughly. I didn't figure all the inflation stuff in there, but I'm sure the story would be similar.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
But the reason, and the state would tell us this, well, the reason your general, your highway fund is dropping is because you are spending less, because that's indexed to what the county spends. That's the comeback they always have there.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because there's supposedly this 6-year rolling average thing out there. The part that's a little confusing to me is why is our state highway aid still dropping, even though we just invested a pretty massive amount of money through our capital improvement program?
Because it's a 6-year rolling average.
Well, you would think that we would start to at least go up because we just put in,
You would think.
I think, almost $1 million extra in one of those years. We also added the wheel tax in, $300,000 a year. So I think we need to look into this a little further.
There's watching.
Yeah. The yellow line at the top, that's other state aids, and I believe that's going to specific departments for specific reasons. So that actually has gone up since 2001. It was at roughly 4 million, and now it's at 6.5 million. So I think that is roughly with inflation, although I didn't check that. Although in 08, we were receiving 7.6 million from that. So it had a peak back in 08 and has been kind of steady to slightly dropping since then. And then our property tax, it was roughly 5 million in 01. This is of course what the county board sets. And now it's up to roughly 10.5 million, so double what it was. And you can see the two big increases between 17 and 18. That was for when the new nursing home hit the debt levy. And then between 20 and 21. And that's when the capital improvement program hit the levy, both $3 million worth of borrowing that we did over 5 years, and then the short-term borrowing of $1 million in 1 year. So back to the cover sheet again. The legislative agenda of the Counties Association. They have an item that says seek an increase in the shared revenue appropriation to reflect the growing costs of providing state mandated services. And I drafted out some language for you all to consider. I think kind of the story here is that the property. I am on 7. Yep, I'm on item number 7. I'm on the cover sheet, at the bottom of the cover sheet. I think the story here is that the property taxes, sometimes I think the state, we hear a lot of stories, and I think you've been mentioning this, Supervisor Gentis, we're very fiscally responsible at the state. We're giving you tax cuts. In the meantime, what do we have to do? We have to raise the property tax, and it kind of makes us looking like we're the bad ones here. So I think the language here that I've got suggested is a little bit more general than just shared revenue, because I think this has to do with other state aids. So what I'm suggesting for language here is to encourage state officials to increase state aids, specifically shared revenue, state highway aids, and other state aids from the state of Wisconsin to Richland County to reduce the impact of increasing property taxes on county residents. So I'd love to hear other thoughts.
Mr. Chair,
Yep, go ahead.
as I was thinking about this, I was just wondering if, and maybe it's crazy to think, but what if we invited Senator Markline and Representative Kurtz and Representative Tranel to come to a meeting where we looked in the same room with them, sat and looked through these charts and looked at these numbers and had a conversation about it? Instead of just writing a letter saying we don't like this, or doing a resolution saying we don't like this and you need to do better, what if we invited them to come?
Well, I certainly think that that would fit under this language. I think in the work plan that you all are creating for the strategic plan, there could be different ways of encouraging them. And, certainly we could go to lobby day with the counties association, but we could have direct contact, and we could write, we could write a letter, we could have a personal meeting. I mean, I'm open to different ideas. I think we got to do many things probably.
I want to commend you for putting this in such a concise way. I agree. I sort of like what Melissa says, that we can sit down and actually talk about it, so they can't have just keep saying I saved you so much money. Monday night, you probably know that Tony Kurtz is going to be at the American Legion from 6 to 7 o'clock. So, that's a place you can go and share. The other thing is, I asked Flint, but I'd like to print some of this out just for myself, but I can't print it out in this document. So I asked if you'd send it to me in a Word document, just so I have it to read a little bit better. Is that possible?
We can get you a copy after this meeting, Supervisor Gentis.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Turk.
I would echo the sentiments that have been expressed so far about the value of this information. I think this should also be published, not just on like a county website, but provided as a letter to the editor, editorial of some time to the Observer, put on Facebook. Getting this out there that when we as county board members are talking about struggling with budgets. Here is one of the very big realities that has impacted us.
Great, there's another good idea. So Supervisor Luck, do you think this would fit into the work plan to
I do.
basically
Yeah,
list
I
out
do
different
definitely.
ideas? Okay,
Yeah. I am not able to write things down though, so if someone could, I assume you're going to write something to give to the strategic planning committee.
yeah, I think the way the motion is written here, I think this would fit into the actual strategic plan, not the work plan. And then in the appendix, I
Right.
would think you could get into the different ideas. So
Yeah, I just don't want to forget any of them. So I'll listen back to the meeting when I'm writing up the work plan ideas. That's
yeah,
fine.
that'd probably be easiest. I think we have in-person meeting, letter to the editor, lobbying the WCA, lobbying at the Capitol along with the WCA.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Seat, go ahead.
just a slight endorsement of this notion of publicizing this information. I believe that the newspapers would be receptive to a news release, certainly a very newsworthy item, with this chart and the information in it. And that news release might be helpful to state in that news release that the county board is requesting that a date be set for a meeting or for the presence of the legislative representatives to be made aware of this and to respond to the board's concern by personally attending a meeting with us. Something along those lines I think would be help if you put public pressure on them through a news release tied to the publication of this chart.
Okay, thank you for that. And Ms. Gentis, you wanted to add something?
Well, I should be reading the strategic plan minutes. When you keep saying you're going to refer it to them for the work thing, and you read a list, that's a list of things that they want the county to start working on. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they, and just jump in, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Luck, but they have the draft strategic plan has several bigger picture action items or strategies. And then they wanted to figure out who's responsible for each one of these strategies. And so that's why they're creating a work plan. And I'm suggesting that maybe in the work plan, under this strategy, if they add this strategy, you could come up, well, these are the different ways we could accomplish it. And these are the different people responsible for, carrying out the news release or the personal meeting with our state reps or whatever it is.
I know this isn't exactly a part of that, but this morning I had two people say again to me that the reason we're having so much debt is because of our nursing home, and I tried to explain that wasn't true, and I talked to Tom Rislow about writing a letter to the editor, but I think maybe incorporated in this for the newsletter, to the local area, somehow explaining the nursing home and how that is a part of this, because there's a image out there of that being hurting this part.
I do, and under 8H
Yeah.
today, we've got a debt report, and that's my other the item that I was responsible for today, and it gets into some detail about that. Okay, so we're looking for a motion here to refer this to the strategic planning committee.
I so move, Linda Jensen.
Okay, motion by Gentis.
I'll second.
Second by Turk. Any further discussion?
And you're gonna send a paper copy.
Mr.
What I
Langbeck's
can
gonna
send-
get you a
What did I
paper
can
copy.
get to my own computer with a printer? Because I can't seem to figure out how to do this off of,
Between him and me, we'll make sure you get it.
okay,
Print it
thank
out.
you.
Very
Okay.
good.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. Thanks for listening to me, everyone. Thanks for all the good
Thank you.
feedback. Agenda item number 8, financial reports. A, treasurer's reports, cash balances. Mr. Langrich's got this pulled up for us. Does anyone, we've got Treasurer Even in the room today. Does anyone have any questions about cash balance documents? Or any comments? I would just say I really appreciate Mr. Even the format and the charts, and you've got running averages, and it all looks very nice, very easy to understand. So
Good.
What number is that on my,
that's under 8A. There's 8A cash balances December. He's got them separated out now by checking balances. That's page 1. Page 2 is LGIP account number 2 balance, and that's our local government investment pool. So that's where any of our excess money goes, and that earns more interest than our checking account. Is that right? Yeah. Not a lot. Checking account has no interest, and there's barely interest on the LGIP account, but he's got those separated out, and then he has them combined on page 3, total available cash. Okay. Anyone needs to jump back to that, just let us know. We'll move on to 8B, Fund 75, capital borrowing. This is the $3 million capital borrowing that we did a couple of years ago. Anyone wants to jump in with anything? Just go ahead and do that. Looks like we borrowed $3 million. We've spent $2.4 million. We have $600,000 left. Looks like the highest amounts that are left are ambulance at 226 grand, followed by fairgrounds at 68 grand, followed by Simons at 65 grand. Oh, I'm sorry, and I skipped land conservation. I was looking for that one because I knew that was pretty close to 100, so that's at 97 grand. Now it looks like Parks hasn't spent anything. They have 38 grand.
We did have just, we had land conservation, I believe was in here, maybe not last meeting, but the meeting prior, where they were going to start initiating those secondary dams to get those going. Other items that we are tracking on, the additional amount for ambulance garage, that amount there is what is available yet for the refit. Of course, we did the purchase of the building, so that is there for the actual constructions and refitting of that. Those are the big pieces that are yet into play.
And we have roughly a year to spend this.
Correct.
And any
March.
leftover, I'm sure we could just send it to them to pay down the debt.
March 2023 will be the date, because yes, we
Okay.
took this out as tax exempt, so it did come with an expiration date on when we have to have this.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Brewer.
what, we have an amount of $65,000 for Simons. What, can someone refresh my memory there?
I believe part of it was in regards to, and I don't know if Tracy's on. I think we're waiting to finalize on the roofing projects. I think some of that was visualized as coming out of the roofing. I think we were trying to reseal the pool, which I think we haven't done yet.
We haven't.
And then if there might have been another bit with the locker rooms, but I would have to reference have to look back to ensure that those are all the items that were on there.
Okay, so when we're out in our committees, let's just, I guess, keep encouraging people to make sure they don't sit on this money, because otherwise we're gonna
It
send
has
it back.
to, yep, the fund has to close.
Okay. All right, let's go down to item 8C. That's Fund 92, short-term capital borrowing.
And this is the balance that you'll see on here from our 2021 balance that we have to expend yet with some of our courthouse projects. Some of that, I believe we taken action to go against our roofing project that we initiated that we're waiting for springtime. Have a couple other additional amounts that we either have to move on the books or reappropriate. but we are down to roughly 160,000, which is good.
Okay, any questions about these? Let's go to 8D, Fund 93 ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds. See, is this on our iPads? I'm not seeing 8D. Maybe we'll have to skip
Double
that
check.
one.
I've got it one other place here.
Yep.
I apologize. I can pull it up on the screen here in just a second. I maybe failed. It was something that I was giving change of mind guidance to my accounting supervisor this morning, so she reformatted one item with it. If you can bear with me just a minute.
Sure thing. Don't rush. Take a break to breathe.
And there we go. Okay. Okay, so with our ARPA funds right now, again, we're tracking on the different expenditures by the different groups that we appropriated together as a committee. The different balances that we have remaining in place. Can you see that all right? No? Let me see if I can blow it up a little bit bigger. How are we looking there? Is that a little bit better? Okay, so our areas, we broke them into the different groups of public health, negative impacts, economic impacts, premium pay, water, sewer, broadband, hard hit communities and families, public sector lost revenues. The projects that we have already, we appropriated a 10%, 10%, 10%, 20%, 50% for those different appropriations. Currently, we've distributed out $260,000 for our child care education grant that has been checks released. We did a premium pay for essential workers at Pine Valley at $112,000. We also have a approval, but not an expenditure on UW Extension broadband survey. We have other types. There's kind of a commitment at this point to use some of this towards the drainage ditch on the Tri-County Airport, as well as we have approval for MIS staff. We did approval for a roof project to replace the roof on the historic, as well as codification, and then our actions today that we took for 2 contracts. And those are approved, but they're not currently expended yet. But this is our current on the left, and then on the right was kind of the different projects that we had visualized by the different categories as well when we appropriated the proportions. Mr. Chair.
Can you just scroll to the right so we right?
Yes.
And have MIS put this on the website as well.
Yes.
You have this out there.
Yep.
Okay, great. Any questions about those?
You mentioned, Clint, the Casanova project is that the one where we had the special meeting before a board meeting and
Correct. Yep.
kind of rushed it through?
Yep. That was through Laval
Laval,
Communications.
yeah.
Yes.
So that didn't happen?
They were not awarded the grant. Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and so far, I just want to say, 8B, C, and D, these are very helpful. So thank you for taking the time to put all this together. But Ms. Wheelock, you were doing some of this work, so thank you. Let's go to 8E, childcare and education grant monitoring. And this one's also,
Mr. Chairman.
oh wait, I'm sorry. You already explained the childcare one on your previous spreadsheet.
We
correct?
did. It was on ARPA. I kind of have a
Okay.
placeholder on here as these being kind of routine reports to bring to the body. We don't have one further developed, but as we start getting verification of expenditures then by the different grant recipients, we want to be able to track that to show when we have to report back up through Treasury that the expenditures are in place. So
Okay, thank you. Mr. Seat, you wanted to say something?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Langford referred to the Laval Casanova. I think he was referring to the broadband expansion proposal. Did I understand Mr. Langford to say that that did not go through?
That is correct. That's correct.
And was not completed. And you said, why was that?
Laval did not receive the grant through the state.
Laval did not what?
They did not receive the grant through the state. So the grant application was denied. They submitted the grant application, but they weren't awarded the funds.
All right. Thank you. Well, it's unfortunate.
Yeah,
Does that mean that's down the drain forever?
I would not say forever. As I'll report, there's another initiative that is out there with deadlines for March 1st on different grant initiatives that are through the state that was advertised through Assemblyman Kurtz and through Senator Markline, I believe, recently.
Okay, let's go ahead and keep moving on here. 8F, this is department expenditure reports. So we have reports in our folder for the following departments: administrator, clerk, county board, MIS, property lister, register of deeds, and treasurer.
Okay, we have them in there. If you'd like me to bring them up and go through, these are a January 1st through a December 31st. So it is ends up being the calendar year, the budget year report with all of as a review. So you folks understand what you're looking at when you see these. On the top center, you're going to see what the time period is. And as you move on the left-hand column, you'll see a 10 general fund. That tells you which fund that the account is located in. The next number below that then is the actual account. In this case, it's 5115, which is the county administrator. There's different project codes. We typically don't have a lot of things identified as project, but it's another nominator that we can use to further subdivide accounts. And then you get into the different object lines. 5111 is salaries, and it streams all the way down to 5999, which is bills no line detail, a catch-all for things that don't fall into the objects given in the system and placed onto the accounting objects. From left to right, then you'll see the annual budgeted amount, the encumbrance amount, of which there should be very slim to none, as we typically don't deal with encumbrances from previous years. And you'll see the posted and processed amount for that reporting for the most recent reporting period. And then you'll see the activity then for the year to date and the remaining balance. Your administrator essentially at the bottom is $133,000. $133,753.99 over, accounting for the additional positions transferred over from the county clerk, and then addition of an assistant position that came in late in the year.
Okay, yeah, I think in my mind, the all-important numbers on these reports for our purposes are in the very lower right-hand corner where it says percent. So this is percent spent of the approved 2021 budget, and this would have been approved back in 2020. So like Mr. Langreich said, we made several changes to his department. So his spending is at 202% of what was approved. Clerk spending then correspondingly had staff pulled out of the clerk's office. So theirs is at 55% of what was approved. And county board, we were at 91%. On 8F, Roman numeral 3, see 91. Then MIS is at 91. Property lister is at 97. Register of deeds is at 96%. Treasurer is at 99%. One question I had, are these just expenditures or did they include revenues also? So I'm asking this because of the Register of Deeds office. You know that a big part of their budget is revenues.
This would have just been the expenditure account.
Got it. Okay, so does anyone have questions about any of those?
Mr. Chair, I just have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that I find to be really helpful with these reports is, yeah, that bottom number, like you're talking about, that's essentially what we look at the most. But also when we're going through the budget process, it helps to look at the different categories to see where they over and underspent to try to determine where we maybe need to be putting more of our budget and less of our budget. So that helps me when we're going through the budget process with the sheriff's department and the other departments under LEJC.
Great, thank you for that. Anyone else?
I can also share with you, County Supervisor Wheelock, I was able to generate a report from our system with trying to capture a summary of the different departments. I will pull it up here and I will defer to County Supervisor Wheelock to kind of talk through on what you're seeing here and if this is an appropriate report that might stand in substitute of the individual department reports and what you had for expectations on trying to monitor budget performance going forward.
So this is under 8G on our folders.
That is correct, yes.
Correct? So there's 8G. There's two 8G documents, and you're looking at this.
I'm sorry, 8G2, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. The first one was a spreadsheet in which we anticipated trying to ask departments to solicit numbers back to us, and then we were able to, I think, find and possibly amend a little bit of a report generated from our AS400 system to try to consolidate the different accounts.
So what Clint had just showed you before with his budget, you'll see on line 2, showing his negative balance of 133,000. So basically this is just breaking it down even further so you don't have so many line items to look at.
It ends up being almost a bottom line summary of all the different accounts.
And on the far right, it shows the percentage of the budget used. I did also include on 8G, the spreadsheet I created for the department heads to fill in their own budgets, their own expenses and revenues, and then it would calculate out the percentages for them. But I feel like the spreadsheet does that same job, and I can do this spreadsheet in about 2 minutes. This report that was just shown.
So not sure, the words you're using to describe our different files. So 8G2 is 12 pages long.
Yep.
And then 8G, says 8G, I think.
Yep, just plain 8G.
That's one page. And
Yeah.
so were you saying, when you were saying something was easier, the spreadsheet, were you talking about
Right.
8G?
So 8G would require each department head to enter in all of their expenses and revenues and budgets every month. And those would feed into this tracker here. You don't see the other part of this, the actual worksheet that they have to use. But the other one is the actual report that I can run off of the AS400 by myself, just putting in the criteria that I want, and it lays it out in this format.
Okay.
So there would be no department head work at all on this.
Question?
Go ahead, Mr. C.
Yes. I would like a little clearer understanding of the department head accounting. You said that reports on department heads would not be like this or would not be in detail.
It'd be the same amount of detail. It would just take them more time because some departments have multiple lines that they would have to go through. For example, Health and Human Services probably have 100 different budget lines. Which,
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's not going to be a requirement that we have a report monthly for department heads.
Exactly. The one you're looking at right now, I can run in just a few minutes.
For a particular department if it's requested.
So
Sure.
Mr. C, what's up on the screen right now is a 12-page document, and this shows every account. Is that the right way to say it? Every account in the county government is 12 pages long. A lot of these they're not alphabetical. It's a little bit, they are ordered, looks like by number, because they give a different account. They'll give, one number will be 61.5434, and the next one is 61.5435, and it goes all the way from 1 to 93. And so this one pretty much captures everything. Does it capture expenditures and revenues?
This is just expenditures. I could
Okay.
probably do the same with revenue. But also, this is just the PDF version, the Excel version, which we save it PDF so you guys can see it better. The PDF or the Excel version doesn't show up on the screen as well. But the Excel version, you can sort by fund number, description, so you can alphabetize it if you'd like. Sort by any way you want.
Got it. And I think this other document, Mr. Seat, that she was showing, this is a one-page document, and it categorizes all these things by department, because a 12-page document is going to be a little bit more difficult for us on the county board to read, because there are so many different funds. Only the folks up in the administrator clerk's office are, they're going to really know a lot of the detail for this. But, if we want to know, how is the Veterans Department doing? Or how is the Economic Development Department or the Fair or Land Conservation? What Ms. Wheelock is saying is she's created this spreadsheet that department heads could go in and they could enter in information. They would have to compile all their different fund numbers and put that combination number into one row on this summary spreadsheet. And I think today, are you all asking for some feedback from us on what we would like to see? This is like a format, or are you just saying this is kind of the format and this is what we're going to share with you? Or
Well, the report that we can generate here takes a lot of administrative burden off, and it's going to be more consistent. If we go to if we do the second one that is more consolidated, it will be more concise, and maybe that's more digestible, but where the questions still lie and how much you need to know is really your appetite. I would advocate in the realms of administrative ease that if we can try out the 08G2 for budget performance tracking, if it becomes kind of too much and it's still overwhelming in nature, we can go the other way. I'd want to give the departments a prep on it though, and like I said, it'll require another document that we're going to be tracking and ensuring that the numbers are in there, and then there'll be more opportunity again for inconsistencies on the reporting aspect of it, because we'll have human hands touching it versus pulling it right out of our system.
okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
This report's very good, I think.
I think Director Scott has a comment for you.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Scott.
From a department head point of view, I look at this is a great report, but I'll also tell you that it's 2 months old. And please, when you look at this, know that, because I know that number is not accurate for my department.
Right.
Not that it's Tammy's fault. I don't get the bills till they're 30 days, and then by the time that they get into the system, so the data you're looking at is 2 months old. And if you were having the department heads do that, I know what money is going to hit there, so it might be a little more accurate if the department heads were actually doing it, because I could project what bills are not entered into the AS400 yet.
That will be that'd be another point we'd have to consider, though. We'd still have to have time and date, so we didn't have administration reporting to you on November's numbers and MIS reporting on October and HHS on September, and that might get confusing as well. But yes, there will be a delay as this goes through our system and what is getting pushed through accounts payable and what is then hitting the general ledger.
Sometimes we do hear from folks, they say, well, we can print out the report, but it won't be current because we haven't received everything yet. I think we've heard this out at the Land Conservation Department, Ms. Luck. And I think that's probably one caveat to put on these reports, is that these are not audited. They're not final. They're just a snapshot in time. But this is way more information than we've had in years, or maybe ever. Because I think we used to get the cash trial balance, but it was only certain funds got pulled into the cash trial balance report that the finance committee got. So this is a lot more transparent.
If we can try this, that would be great. There, of course, like with every report that you're going to see, without being able to go into both sides of the systems, dive into it and understand what transactions are happening, you're going to have questions. Like even on this one, If you head down to Department of Justice grant, you'll be like, what is going on here? We're $67,000 over. If you don't understand that there's a matching revenue of grant monies coming in to cover those expenditures, it looks very unhealthy. Same thing like with a tax deed property. There's different expenditures that were taken out against that, but those were kind of, I think, in regards to like the Casanova project and our project on First Street and other different expenses that are going into there. So they help put up red flags again in budget performance monitoring, which is probably what I hope you folks are trying to get at. And it would require, though, somebody understanding the revenue aspect of it or seeing the revenue lines and understanding how they tie together.
Because again, this is just expenditures. The 12-page report does not have revenues.
That is correct.
Correct.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Gentis.
I can't find what page, but there's two things in there twice with that. The UW Richland outlay is in here twice, so I don't know if that matters to the budget down below. It's off the page now. It's page,
Is it page 4?
where it stops, the top of it is command radio grant.
Okay.
UW Richland outlay is on there.
Yeah, it looks like the second number, the 32.5681, has zero money budgeted for that. It says it's for projects, so we must not use that line anymore. And if you're comfortable with that, I could always go through and cut
Well,
out.
it says 60,000 in both places.
Underneath the general 32 is a capture summary then, Lynn, of all the accounts under 32.
Okay,
Is that?
so then it
Oh.
doesn't add to the total spending down below the twice there.
Yes, I think that's at the bottom is going to be then that
Okay.
fund summary. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, where it doesn't have any, it doesn't have a decimal point, no numbers after it. That's a
Right.
summary of a particular fund.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Okay.
So you'd also be able to then, if you wanted a consensus down, you'd have fund performance measures consolidated down from the individual accounts.
Sorry, I just.
Oh, that's a great
No, that's
catch. I hadn't
good.
noticed that, so
good.
that's a good thing to point out. I do think it'd be interesting to be able to sort this by that first column, but maybe, I don't know, maybe even having the spreadsheet available. I mean, I might be interested in sorting by remaining balance or percent of budget, because then you could see what's the stuff that's really overspent versus the stuff that's kind of piddly stuff that we don't need to worry about. So I can see why the spreadsheet would be helpful, but I can understand at the moment why you would just want to print this 12-page report out instead of having department heads combine everything. Although I do know HHS does an excellent job of combining everything for their committee. I've watched their meetings and they do stellar work there. Those are just my thoughts, and I just really appreciate having this. This is very nice to be able to look at. Okay, any other comments on 8G? This is the format. Okay, we'll go to 8 then. This one, let's see, Supervisor Luck had mentioned to me that it would be nice to be able to see where we're at with our debt in regards to the radio tower project when we're thinking about having to borrow additional money, like where would that fit in? So I've got, I think it's 6 pages here or so. On the first page, this shows how much debt we have outstanding by year. So, and that's as of January 1st of each year. So as of this moment in time, Richland County has, this is if all my calculations are correct, you know, and probably need someone with more of a finance background checking me on some of these things, but it's 24.8 million. And then our debt levy limit, we don't, if I'm doing these year things right, if I'm thinking we can't calculate the debt levy limit for 2022 yet, but we can do it for 2021. The levy limit is 63.5 million. So if you go to page 2, this shows the percent of our levy limit that is used for each year. So it's currently at 42%, or I should say as of last year, it was at 42% since we don't have the debt limit number calculated yet. So we have 58% remaining. And I pulled some of this information from the auditor's reports. Then page 3 shows the actual figures. And then page 4. So I was trying to think about, I think one of the questions for the radio tower project is going to be, how much debt would we be putting on for how many years? So say we did like a 10-year note, you know, our amount's going to be a lot less than if we did a 5-year note. So what I did with the green line, this shows what our debt is scheduled for coming years. So from this current year, it's at 3.6 million. And by the year 2036, these are all of our commitments that we've made, including Pine Valley. It would be down to 1.5 million. But this $1 million short-term borrowing that we're doing, that could be an ongoing thing. You know, that's really up to the county board, for the whole board to decide each year. That's why I drew that orange dashed line, because that shows if we kept that million, what would our debt be doing? So we have a very slow drop in our debt from currently 3.6 million down to 3.3 million 6 years from now. So our debt really is pretty steady there. Then between 2028 and 2029, it drops by quite a bit, by almost $1 million. Then it stays flat till the year 2036. So the chart on
You're
page,
assuming that we aren't gonna have any more debt, like for major buildings, which we know we need some.
exactly, the green line, I called it committed annual debt payment. So what have we already committed to? This isn't a projection of what our debt will be, because I certainly don't know. I don't know if any of us know what we're going to decide. But I did project the short-term borrowing to continue at 1.05 million, and that's what that dashed orange line is. And then if you go down to page 6, this is, so what I did, this was maybe about a year ago, I think. It was before former clerk Vlasic had left. He sent me all of the, I don't know what the term is. They're like schedules, I think, for all of our different debt issues.
Yep.
And they show when we have to make a principal payment, when we make an interest payment. So it's a little different than like our home mortgage or a car loan, because the payments are only twice a year for all these government-related borrowing. So you can see on the left-hand side in columns B and C, it says 1.5 million. We borrowed that in August of 2015. We borrowed, if you scroll to the very bottom, $1.5 million for Pine Valley. It says it at the top too. And then if you go to the columns, it'd be the fourth and fifth columns, there we borrowed $10 million also in August of 2015 for Pine Valley. You can see how all those payments are split up. And then in the sixth and seventh columns, another 10 million. So that was 21.5 million that we borrowed. And in 2017, we borrowed 30 grand for squad cars. That's all been paid off already. Then in 2020, we did, must have been 2 refinancing packages instead of 1. We did one for 1.2 million and the other for 2.6 million. And looks like those will be paid off by 2026. And then 2020, we borrowed 3 million. That's the fund we were just going over, and that will be paid off in 2027. So that's why we see that big drop in 2027, between 27 and 28. We see a big drop because we paid off all our refinancing and we paid off our 3 million of short-term borrowing. but we still have the nursing home payments to be making through the year 2036. So that's where we get basically 1.4 million a year for that. So you can kind of see here how it's all laid out, and as we're thinking about, I mean, if and when we borrow for the, I shouldn't even say if with the radio tower because the county board already committed to it, but when we borrow for the radio tower project, I think those annual payments on the very right-hand side, that's what people are going to be really curious about, because any increase in that without a corresponding decrease in our operating levy is going to increase taxes. That's what I got for folks on this one. Supervisor Luck, I know you're in the car, right? I think you're maybe in the car right now, so I don't know if you can. You've been able to look at any of those documents, but I don't know if you have any thoughts in regards to the radio tower project.
I do. I mean, obviously, so if let's say we have to borrow $8 million for radio tower, doesn't that put us over 50% of our borrowing capacity? Is that true?
This is Administrator Langrick. Yes, it will. We had Carol Luck came in and talked for about 2 hours with myself and Clerk.
Carol Worth.
Carol, no, not Melissa's family. Carol Worth. Carol Worth came in and talked with us when we were completing our last short-term borrowing, and myself and Clerk Kalish had a terrific opportunity to talk with her for about 2 hours. We talked in regards to borrowing and different things to consider and such. So Carol had mentioned that like the 50% mark just a few years back had a lot of different carry with it. At this point now, borrowers and buyers of notes, bonding more so, aren't terribly threatened by that anymore, and they'll still buy your bonds, provided you can show that you still have your incomes and you have some type of management where you're not going to default. So at one point where that did mean a significant amount, now it means lesser, depending on the volume that you are borrowing. Whether or not you have to go back through a Moody's for getting another rating is also a consideration. But her kind of the takeaway from it was it's not an absolute showstopper financially in finding buyers. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that it's not a talking point, though, politically when we talk about how much we should be borrowing. So that's what I know on that topic.
Mr. Chair, I have another question.
Yeah, before you go to that, I just want to make one quick comment that, so for, let's see, maybe I don't have the figure. Not sure what our debt outstanding will be next year, but it's currently at 24.8 million. And our levy limit's probably going to go up because that's 5% of our equalized value, or the value of all of our property. So if you add 8 million to, say it just stays at 25 grand or 25 million to be conservative, we'd be up at 33 million. Now if our levy limit is still increasing, it could be roughly 50%. It could be pretty close to that 50% mark. It will just depend on what our debt outstanding is and what our levy limit is. So I don't think it will be much over 50% unless we borrow some additional monies for other stuff.
I do have as well at one point, I think already 7-8 months ago, I asked Carol Worth to run a debt schedule with consideration for incorporating bonding for a tower and trying to have that not impact our millage rate. So essentially then doing without our short-term borrowing project and what that looked like. And I think she was able to produce a schedule that kind of met those specifications, with a lot of the front end of it being interest and then the back end of it being more heavy in principal, getting out past the 2027 date when some of our other debts are bought out. So there's a way to kind of maneuver with that as well, on whether you want to go heavy front, heavy back, to move principals around to try to, again, reduce impact. Of course, you end up incurring more interest then with pushing principal down the road, but it can help in maintaining millage rates.
And that's what she did with Pine Valley. You can see that in the chart on page 6 too.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Luck.
Question, I guess it's for Mr. Langrick, but so have we had any conversations or any idea sessions about ways we could potentially pay off some of this debt faster? Because having Pine Valley hang over our heads until 2036 is difficult. It means that we can't be investing in, or it's difficult to invest in anything else. So I just wondered if we had any ideas on how we could possibly potentially pay off debt slightly faster.
Might be a good future agenda item.
Without reductions in other expenditures, either against your operational levy or your debt service levy. That's kind of the two things you can do. You could refinance at a higher rate and put it against the debt service levy, but it's going to impact your millage rate. You'll bring in more short-term taxings to go against that. There's different options to maneuver with that, but trying to do that without impacting further burden on the tax base is going to be a challenge without reduced expenditures.
Can I just say that? Yeah, for the amount of money we've borrowed, I don't think 2036 is that long for that large a debt. I mean, when you think about other big projects.
Okay, anyone else?
Mr. Chair, yeah, I have one more comment.
Go ahead.
I'm thinking again about the conversations we had about Pine Valley potentially putting money towards the debt on Pine Valley. And I realize that we're using that in our operational funds and that would create some issues. But I guess I'd still like that to be kind of, when we're developing our budget, to potentially think about how we could have Pine Valley put their extra revenues into the debt instead of the operating budget.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, we'll keep this, now we've got this out there and we can keep updating this as the months and years march by here. Okay, so if there's nothing
Mr. Chair,
else,
sorry, one more thing.
yeah,
I just want to remind everyone that, according to the Little Green Book from WCA, we have the highest debt per capita of any county.
Oh.
And I don't know why, but that bothers me.
Mr. Brewer, go ahead.
Well, given all the other things we know, though, declining population, aging population, declining school enrollment, I mean, that's not surprising.
I think a lot of the stuff that's in the strategic plan about growing our tax base in this county, that would definitely affect the per capita debt ranking that we have. So I think that just underscores how important our strategic plan is, and I think we're all excited to see that get passed so that we can start carrying out some of those things. Okay, let's move on. Thanks for the discussion on that, everybody. Let's move on to agenda item number 9, the outline of the 10-year financial planning formats.
Mr. Chair, if I can be so bold, with items 9, 10, and 11 left, if the committee is willing and yourself willing to let Director Scott talk on item number 10 and then address 11 and then come back to 9. I'm not sure exactly. We might get into some deep conversation, and I want to make sure that you have enough time to allocate towards 10 with my items. If they need to be bumped, we can hold till next meeting.
Okay, I doubt anyone's going to object. So let's move on to agenda item number 10, projects and initiatives. This is a report from MIS. Scott, go ahead.
Thank you, Glenn. Sean. So this is just a brief report that we prepared. There is a PDF file in your iPads that has a rough overview of MIS, and I'll refer to it as I go through this report.
Before you go any further, I'm not seeing it under agenda item number 10 in our folders? Is it,
No, it is called 2022 MIS budget
summary?
summary.
So it's
yeah.
at the very, so anyone looking,
Yeah.
it's at the very bottom of our
Mhm.
documents. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So this is really an impact on what's happened in the last 2 years, how things have changed, how they've grown. And since COVID, the demands have increased, and in the last year alone, they've increased. We've had to learn numerous new skills, and in the past 30 days, we've had 324 tickets opened. We've come to trying to balance the request to keep the most people working and up at one time. Every day, there are requests for users that are leaving due to their own or the family's illnesses. We get requests to have remote accesses, or remote people that are working remotely from home need to have support. This means that not only are we supporting the internal network, we are also supporting infrastructure for the county in the field. This is in addition to pre-COVID normal day-to-day function of MIS. We have increased the number of computers, laptops in the past year, the number of mobile devices as well. We've seen a large increase in expenses. Not only do the items cost more with inflation, there's more to support. We've added more options, such as working from home, more endpoints again, more computers, mobile devices, and the cost for MIS functions and infrastructure is increased exponentially. Cybersecurity is higher than ever. We're spending money to keep up with the threats that are associated with that. The funds that were given to the government during the pandemic as one-time source funded many projects. Those projects are now needing to be continued. And as we do that, there are costs associated with that that we need to incorporate into our normal budget. We must maintain computers bought with those ARPA funding and other grant fundings and keep the licensing up to date for the endpoints and additional equipment for ongoing costs for the future years. If you look at the budget sheet that's out there, the cost per year last year when I did this was, there's a 192,652 figure in the middle. That number was only at 130,000 a year. So we have increased $60,000 a year. This is not all MIS funded, because when you look at page 2, I have spent or proposed to be spent in January. Not all of this money is coming out of the MIS budget.
I'm still not following because we only have a one-page document. And I'm not, the figure you just said, we don't have either.
Okay. I will put it out there. There's a page 2 that shows what we've spent or proposed to spend in January. Not sure why it's not. Clinton, can you scroll over to the right?
Oh, I think I just saw it. It's highlighted in green.
Nope, that's the total
192,000.
amount every year. There's another amount that didn't.
It's below it here.
There you go.
Am I there?
Yep.
Okay.
So this amount that says the badge printer, the MIS patch cables, drill, that stuff, when you total that up, what we've spent so far this year, and not all of this is coming out of the MIS budget, but this is in January to the 20th. So this is where I was talking, your data is 2 months old. We've spent $66,000 this year. And we're 20 days into the year. Not all out of MIS budget, but that's all computer support that the county is spending. And I think that one of the things we lack, and I know I see this every day in the budgeting that comes out of other departments, is you're not getting a true picture of what your IT costs are from your department head. Not that it's their fault, but some stuff gets put under office support. And that might be your toners, that might be your software, that might be your antivirus. It's not split out from the cost of your paper. And I think that that's a piece that the Finance Committee is missing. And so it kind of gets buried in there. And I don't know that finance and personnel or the entire county board is understanding the true cost of your IT needs and functions. So when it comes time to budget next year, there's going to be questions, and I don't know that you're going to be fully funded to do all of those things that we're doing now with ARPA funding or COVID monies or any of those types of action items. One of the things we have budgeted for this year was to add new equipment into this room for $5,000. I am telling you, sitting here January 20th, I don't know how I'm going to do that. It's the costs that are associated that I'm seeing day by day are going up exponentially, and I don't know how we're going to afford to do all the things we want to do.
Question.
Yes, Don.
You're speaking of the IT cost there not being a formula for reasonable allocation of IT costs across the board to various departments, and that needs to be done. Do I understand what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I don't know that the board truly sees all of the IT costs in a clear picture.
There's a couple things. Is it okay if I step in with
Sure.
a couple comments?
Yeah.
So there's some things that we're trying to remedy this in the future. It doesn't help us right today. We'll circle back around to that today. But going forward into 2023, Director Scott, myself, and the county supervisor Wheelock, we've sat down and talked about reformatting one of our existing funds to make a service fund that tries to capture expenses of centralized costs like licensing, computer purchase, server purchasing, wiring cables, different installation pieces, in which MIS is providing like a service to our other types of departments. With that fund then, we'll be able to do some types of journal entries against departments that have revenue accounts and can put expenses towards state reimbursements or towards applied revenues or things of that nature. So that'll help us pull in some of the centralized costs. Another thing that potentially we can do we get to a point of having a defined finance policy is to queue and kind of define where in department budgets the different expenditures should be coming from by account line or by object line. We may have availability then working through Ms. Wheelock again to be able to generate reports by object to know expenditures against individual lines, which may help again, but then that requires though ensuring that all departments are making expenditures when they're buying computer mice, that it's all going against line 5831, small computer purchases or something of that nature. In the short term, though, as identified, we've taken actions to try to do a lot of these purchases of things that we know that we need, which has expended our short term, and we're left with how are we going to pay for these types of things? And oh, by the way, we are also kind of sitting out there with additional liabilities that we know about that we've yet to address that do jeopardize and could compromise the integrity of our system, whether it's by malware attacks, whether it's by, we addressed some of them today with like the JAMP system, but just like we talked about, okay, we're going to use ARPA funds to plug that this year. ARPA funds run out. It's going to be then hinged on that levy in order to maintain it going forward. I plan on working in great lengths with Director Scott, who has shown me a 5-year plan that's in place for the different computer infrastructure of pieces that we still need. And oh, by the way, let's get ready for a tower project. The tower project that we know we need is going to come again with not just a lump sum. We're going to borrow and bond this money to get our infrastructure piece in place, but immediately we're going to have different licensings associated with it, increased maintenance fees, probably increased softwares. If we switch to digital, now we have a digital system that is also can have different backware, malware, different things that we have to worry about. So compound that with, yes, we are in a pandemic and we're also transitioning into a culture where we have more expectations, just like today, where we want to be able to teleconference and be able to talk across different media formats. We have to really, as an organization, keep a center focus on those MIS expenses as we more and more take them for granted in order to do business. So thank you for allowing me to soapbox. I will turn it back over to yourself, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thoughts from committee members?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
in my opinion, it all boils down to administration. And that's long been a talking point for me, is we have to get a handle on administration. We have to know how to charge out departments for space, for instance. We have to know how to charge out departments for IS support. If you think back 100 years, instead of IS, we had 50 clerks making entries in books. So it's all shifted. It's different now, but these are things that we can get handles on and have a way to charge it out to the various departments instead of laboring or asking one. No, we have this vague, the IS department, okay, we'll charge it off to them. Well, it really isn't their function. It is their function as support to make things happen, but in the final analysis, that charge has got to come through the entity that we're looking at, the reporting department. So these are things that, as we go forward with our administrator, we'll get a handle on these. And it's not going to happen all tomorrow or by the end of this meeting, but I hear Barb. I understand what she's talking about. I hope I do anyway. And we need to get a handle on allocating these expenses.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brewer. Anyone else?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. Turk.
I want to wholeheartedly agree with Marty about allocating funds, but also just being honest about what we are asking from our MIS. It has become part and parcel of doing business as a county, and needing to always take into account as we're planning, not just the dollars for purchasing a computer, but as Barb has said, the ongoing load of not just costs, but of time and manpower needed to provide service to those users, to keep things running as they should, to defend the system against attacks, and make allowances for that both fiscally and personnel wise. This will not be an area that's going to shrink or become, less budget impactful over time. It's definitely going to grow, and I think we need to be prepared for that and include that as part of our forward-looking planning. Hopefully there are ways we can make things more efficient. Hopefully there are ways we can tap, funding streams to be able to support it financially, but also being cognizant of the impact it's going to have on workload and making sure we have sufficient resources, whether we have them in-house or we're contracting for them or however we're doing it, but making sure we have sufficient resources to properly manage that infrastructure, that if it goes down, we're in a very bad way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turk. Anyone else?
I just had one more point to make.
Hold on just a second. Just want to make sure. No one, other committee members? I want to share a few comments too before you go, Ms. Scott. So I think that personally what I see after being here for 4 years is I think that the work ethic of MIS staff is outstanding. Told Ms. Scott that. I think I've gotten a lot more used to using the help desk ever since I started here, and the quickness with which they respond to me is, for these monthly meetings where I'm sending in documents to post on the website and our iPads, is I so appreciate it, and I know they've been taking on a lot more with how our IT needs have been growing. I think that without the American Rescue Plan Act and the county board support of increasing property taxes through our capital improvement program, we wouldn't have been able to accomplish as much as we have. We have carve outs for MIS in both of those different funds. So the county board has shown support for increasing resources going to MIS. We may not, we're mostly volunteers here. We may not see everything that you see, but that's why we have you to give us projections and give us choices so that we can prioritize if there are different options that we have as a county to implement certain MIS priorities and not others. And if you can see costs adding up, and you're wondering how this is going to affect our levy in future years, or if there will be a possibility of continuing that, I think it's up to staff to give us some of those projections and show us that. So I'm just seeing 1 year right here. I'm not seeing projections. So I'm definitely open to being educated. And I really agree with Mr. Turk. I think we need to be looking for, and I agree with Mr. Brewer too about what you said. We need, and my thought was we need to be looking for efficiencies or creative ideas to reduce our expenses across the county operation and ways to also increase our revenues. And I think our strategic plan will help us with both of those things. And I think we all need to get on the same page about how we need to be doing both of those things. And it's not directed just at MIS. This is the whole county operation, because I can see how MIS is probably growing, and maybe some of our other departments need to be shrinking because maybe the demand is not there as much as it used to be. So those are my thoughts. Ms. Scott, you want to go along with your comments?
It really flows with that, is that as much as we have grown, one of the things that Administrator Langrick had made mention to is that we're bringing in this radio tower project. When we met with the vendors, they looked at us and they said, oh, by the way, you know that these are now IP-based. How are you protecting them? Every endpoint, every copier, every cell phone, every tower, every radio is now a part of the computer network, and it has to be considered that that is an entry point for an attack on data and on our entire system. And that is huge. And I do not want to be responsible when, and I don't say if, it's when we are attacked. So we really have to be vigilant with all of those and making sure that our network is secured. So that's part of what we're doing. And when you look at that from an IT perspective, you look at it more globally than departmentally. And that's one of the things that I really think that the board and the committee does, is they look at it globally as well. They look at the whole county, not just at one department. And we need to continue to do that to make sure that we're protected as a whole and not as pieces.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're ready to move on to agenda item number 11 then. Mr. Langrick, Administrator's report. And I'm not going to read through all those. I'll let you do that.
Sure. Mr. Chair, looking for guidance, given as needed to, I'm kind of going to be telling you what we plan on doing, and you tell us to pump the brakes. First item is purchasing cards. Administration is pursuing a contract with U.S. Bank to acquire purchasing cards for the different departments. The system includes cardholder portals, profiles, tracking expenditures, local administrative authorities that we would have, rebates on purchases. There's no annual fees outside of late payment penalties, and there's no requirement to associate these cards with individual social security numbers. The contract is finishing legal review. Attorney Wendell has went through it. I have 2 questions yet out to the contractor to ensure that we're able to comply with state statutes in entering into it, but plan on getting that implemented, training, and cards distributed and up by the end of March. Any questions or concerns on that one, or I can continue, Mr. Chair?
Could you have a one, Mr.
Go ahead,
Chairman?
Mr. Seat. Yep.
Could you tell us in 1 or 2 sentences how these cards will work, who will have them?
Trying to think how to do it 1 and 2 sentences. I get long-winded.
All right, go ahead.
Envisioning one per department. They get put out just like a debit type card. They're going to be most handy for our departments that are doing purchasing online, reserving rooms if there are conferences, making purchases in which we don't have to then request an invoice and then do a billing through accounts payable. There's still an invoice that's generated that shows the different expenditures that are went out through the service card. those will get submitted through accounts payable then with a matched up voucher and invoice to connect it for auditing purposes.
I presume a policy will be developed for the guidelines for the use of these cards by department heads or employees, right?
It'll be part of the intentions and it'll follow a lot of our current purchasing practice now. So it just makes a way of convenience to be able to do purchases.
Very good.
Mr. Brewer, did you have your hand up?
No, Mr. Seep will not have a card.
Oh, thank you.
There'll be no county board card.
Health and we've got an initiative here to move Health and Human Services courthouse payrolls to a 1-week withholding in July. Administrator will be giving notification to employees of the Health and Human Services payroll that a 1-week withholding will be implemented on the 15th pay period, July 29th of 2022. I've got a couple slides here I will share with you very, very quickly so that you can kind of see what the intentions are. It pulls up. These pull up. But essentially right now things are, here we go. Right now things are challenged for us because our pay period, we're trying to pay to date. So we are releasing checks on, if you look on the slide 2 there, we're releasing checks on day 13 of a pay period for Health and Human Services and Courthouse with essentially 1 day yet that the folks are projected to be working. So on a given day, we spend the first, or a given pay period, we spend the first day, sometimes 2, trying to project when we're going to be working in the next 2-week period. We request departments are submitting them in day 3 through 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10 are processing internally at our office because we are trying to process for HHS, EDRC, Health, MIS, Admin, Clerk, Treasurer, ROD, Register of Deeds, etc. We have to get the transmittal to the bank on day 11 for a check to be distributed for day 13. Doing a 1-week withholding would give us 1 week of space in which we will be able to log actual times worked. We'll still be projecting then week 2 to do the final transmission and deposit then on week 3. We plan on doing this in conjunction with the 15th pay period because that is the 3rd pay period of July, with the intent then that folks that have auto drafts going off to different bills, mortgages, things like that, they'll have 2 full installments in July. Their 3rd installment or their 3rd payment in July 29th will then just be the 1-week installment. The 2nd week then gets kind of forwarded to the next pay period 16, and then that all kind of gets staggered. With that being said, we have intentions then to do another withholding the following year in 2023 for everyone so that we can get on a system where our pay periods are day 1 through 14. We can actually be logging actual times worked. We then spend the next 2 weeks through the processing system of reporting those, submitting them from departments to our payroll processing, transmitting, and then getting those out to employees. It does incur a small or a short period of pay again, which can be a hardship against employees because they are going to receive a paycheck with only 1 week and then have to wait 2 weeks to get that expected week put into their accounts, and then it kind of always is going to have that next week then shifted out into the future. But we want to get notification out early so that folks can financially plan for it and that we can implement again in July. The other 2 initiatives with this is to get UW Cafe and Simon Center onto a on the same pay period. One goes, I believe, Monday through Sunday pay period, and one goes from Wednesday to Tuesday. So we're going to get them lined up as well. So we're all on a Sunday to Saturday. There are no questions with those. I can continue on.
Question: is this basically a bi-weekly system?
Every 2 weeks, we release paychecks. That is correct. Okay. Continuing on, broadband survey design. I'll be working with Director Haiti, Director Glassbrenner, and staff UW Extension Research Center. I forgot to mention Assistant Dell will also be with us. and developing a recommendation for the survey format to release to the UW Survey Extension Lab. Survey planning meeting is set for next Wednesday, in which we'll be meeting, but hold your thoughts on that. We'll jump down to F. Keep in mind, though, we recently found out that Prosperity Southwest Wisconsin has a broadband initiative going on right now. In working with a broadbanding testing organization, Prosperity Southwest has an internet speed testing website designed to help the region, communities with the mapping. It reports entries to the on internet speed, and the test can be found right off of their main web page. You go to the website, you click into putting in your address, you hit test, and it's supposed to test your speed transmission, and then it logs it by location on what the speed of that connection is, upload, download, two other jargon terms that Barb would have to probably explain to me. So conversation that we'll have on Wednesday is probably defining on if that type of data is going to meet the needs. And if it's not, then can we still issue out a mail out survey that is going to either do a follow-up or fill those holes to us? In talking with MIS staff, there is a potential that you might not get, there might be outliers in the data where if somebody's hitting a ping on test my computer speed, but they're going through a router or a modem that has a lot of devices trying to also send information through it, it could create an artificial bottleneck and their speeds actually won't really tell you what type of connection they have coming into their homes. But before we move forward full on with the survey through UW Extension, we wanted to tease out and say, make sure we're not doing a replication of the same type of data that's going to be coming back to you that's already being done for us through Prosperity Southwest. And I believe Director Glassbrenner may be on to expound upon that. I don't know if he is.
Yeah.
I'm here. I thought that was an excellent summary. Yeah, we definitely can talk about it more in depth. We covered that in a Prosperity Southwest meeting today. We're actually developing newspaper articles and talking about boosting people's awareness through Facebook and Google ads. So there will be a good discussion on Wednesday. This is a project that is being underwritten or has been funded partially by grants by WEDC. And there's already testing throughout the Midwest and a significant amount of testing being done in Wisconsin. So we're kind of being added on to that. So I'm glad to answer a question if there is any. Otherwise, we'll move to the Wednesday meeting.
Yeah, Supervisor Gentis has a question.
So I gotta make sure I get that right. Will the Prosperity Southwest find out people who don't have anything? I mean, when you're talking about asking Facebook that, they assume that people have
Yes,
assets.
there is an option. It's all computer based, but if somebody were to come and say like the library, they can put in their address and click, I do not have internet. And But I mean, that takes the initiative of somebody going to a different portal to report through there that they don't have.
So will this one, if you go through this prosperity and you decide that will make quicker decisions because these grant applications are due fairly soon, and I think there's a lot of money out there right now. Is that what you're thinking rather than going through UW River?
But this survey is out there right now, and there is data being collected on this one right now. We haven't initiated ours yet. The grant applications that they're asking for are due back. I'd have to look. I think it's May.
Oh, it's May. Okay.
May, double check. But yes, anything that we do with the broadband grants that are through the state, though, like the other ones, we're going to be required to have a partnership with the private utilities in order to be eligible for them. And we haven't taken any actions to date now to try to pursue any of those. And I do have the information on here of what the map looks like for the county again and how to access them and all the grant details.
I know you're tired of my saying this, but I think this is highly important because you're talking about increasing the tax base and everything. And I think this is the biggest impediment to economic growth in our area around the county of not having good broadband.
I think I've got just a couple more points here. COVID education, Director Thorson has put out 4 packets of our COVID vaccination education, as well as information on where testing is also available. And we have a Health and Human Services personnel update that was placed into your folder. I can go through that with you. Bottom line is they're at a 28% turnover that they recorded for 2021. Plan on coming forward to your next meeting. There was recommendation made by the board recently to address compensation changes and considerations. That will be accompanied as well by overall report from the organization, and we'll have discussion points on that coming in depth to you at the next meeting. Budget performance deficiency reports, we're anticipating having that completed hopefully in March. I don't know if they'll be fully audited in March, but much like the report you saw today, we're hoping to further refine that. ARPA rural provided relief funds, recognition today to Therese Deckert, Pine Valley, in pursuing and obtaining $433,000 through the American Rescue Plan Rural Payments should be program. Dispersions of these will be sent out to ambulance at $14,000, Health and Human Services at $96,000, and Pine Valley at $323,000. So thank you for Therese for finding that other avenue in which ARPA funds came down into the state and we were able to access. I believe that is what I have today, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for highlighting that last point. I got an email from Mr. Rislow about that, I think when it happened a couple of weeks ago, and I said, can you share it with everyone else? Because I think we're very thankful to county employees who are able to track down additional revenue sources, and that's a pretty big one. So thank you, Ms. Deckert. Any follow-up questions or comments for Mr. Langrek on his reports? Not, I think you can go ahead and move on to that agenda item number 9, outline of 10-year financial planning formats.
Okay, 1 second here. The right folders. Nope, nope, nope. Wrong year. 22. Okay, this is, like many things I touch, a little bit messy, but we're looking today to try to kind of get draft concepts on ensuring the information that we're going to be putting in this planning is kind of brought forward. So before we go out and start hunting down the actual data that we're looking for, we're confirming that in fact, yes, that is what we want to be brought up to the table to confirm. The first document in here at 09A is a very hastily, I should say hastily, I've been working on it for quite a while, but a very rough draft of what is kind of seen as an operations order that is seen as the plan for the planning, if you will. First thing on there is kind of the mission statement, the intentions of this entire process of the who, what, where, when, why, or who, what, when, how, and why. The intent here is that Richland County Board of Supervisors adopts a 10-year financial plan that establishes balanced trajectory by 2028. That is done by no later than June 14th of this year. So that is kind of the intent, is to have a plan through you folks off to the county board by the 14th. Now, how do we define balanced trajectory? Well, it's kind of defined as the county's expenditures can reasonably managed by revenues and borrowing, and future projects are managed. How are we doing this? Is developed by the county administrator, supporting staff, necessary consultants with oversight by the Richland County Finance and Personnel Committee. And then why? To reach a long-term balanced trajectory and manageable expenses and sustained revenues to set the county on the path to, 1, to ensure effective delivery of mandated and prioritized services most appropriate for the community needs and desires. 2, responsibly maintain buildings, properties, and infrastructure entrusted to the organization by the community. And 3, to achieve a financial position that allows future county boards the ability to respond to unforeseen events and desired deviations. The intended compensation or the composition of what you're going to receive as a plan is going to be a report on the financial position, the fiscal position, and forecasted expenditures and revenues with, of course, the defined assumptions. As we start to project out, we kind of have to agree on what the assumptions are for what our trends are going to look like. Number 2 is you'll have a forecasted capital improvement plan. 3, a decision worksheet, which will look much like our worksheet that we used for the operational planning, but expanded out. And then 4, planned budgetary guidance and initiatives from 2023 through 2033 with a 5-year focus on solutions. So kind of what that all means is you'll have a report on what our trajectory and where we look at today. You'll have a forecasting on our capital needs, our buildings and our equipment and our MIS projects. We'll have a decision worksheet that kind of then focuses, if you see the capital plan is looking at our debt service levy mostly. You'll then have a worksheet that's kind of more focused on operations and operational levy expenses. And then you're going to have then the planned budgetary guidance. That's how I see this is what we can do is we can try to help shape what the guidance is going to be for future budgets to be able to distribute out and let departments then come back with their proposals. But the more we can give out in the front of each year and several years, the more time we're going to be giving notice to departments if they're going to have impacts on their services, on funding, for them to be able to respond to either find other types of ways to deliver those services to communities or other types of funding sources, etc. Implementation of the final plan upon adoption, Richland County Board. The initiatives of the plan will be implemented through the Richland County Administrator under the authority of Wisconsin State Statute 59, and the authorities vested in the Finance and Personnel Committee is defined through the committee structured document. So we arrive at a resolution that says this is kind of our intent as a county board. Go forward, Administrator and Finance and Personnel lay out the next several years of what guidance is anticipated for the departments. So then when we hit annually an operations budget and capital review, we have a little bit of intentions and expectations on what those prioritized capital investments are and what our prioritized services are. And maybe I'll pause right there on that top section to make sure there's any questions, concerns, talking points that you'd like to have kind of on the mission. I know we're getting kind of bumping up against that 2-hour window, Mr. Chair. If you want me to kind of do a faster 5-minute revised version and then maybe leave these out in the folder for you folks to review and come back with comments next meeting, please tell me what your flavor is.
Well, I think the detailed explanation of the first part is probably good. Probably need to go a little quicker because we'll have, for the rest of it, because we'll have Mr. Brewer, you need to take off. So, oh, there's no school today. All right. But yeah, you could probably go a little,
okay, we'll pick it up
for the rest
I'll
of it. But I think the initial explanation was helpful for me. I was digesting that. I think it's good.
Okay, so then apologize, but my brain still works in 5 paragraphs. Operation orders from the military. So then it kind of breaks down into then what would be a situation report is then that first piece, your report on your financial position. The first element is understanding the position from a budgetary perspective, where we're talking again about summaries on debt service levy, operational levies, significant revenue streams, etc. Also incorporated into the conversation then is having our auditors and understanding your position from an auditing, understanding how your funds are established and which of those are designated, undesignated, which monies can be moved and which ones are kind of already committed. With this section then also then is kind of the financial graphs, the lines that'll be in place that kind of gauge the trajectories of anticipated revenues and anticipated expenditures. And then much like Supervisor Murphy Lopez had today, we incorporate the graphs on understanding what our capital needs are and associating that against what our borrowing capacities may be or may need to be. We then incorporate a section on organizational assumptions. We put in the different informations that we may know of assuming different revenues, assuming different expenditures that are either petitioned or that we know we have coming, different elements like we just talked about today with MIS, different elements in which we know we might need other staffing changes across the different departments. There's a section that's kind of dedicated towards that. We get down then into commitments. We have a section of the financial projection, again, that kind of shows our different goals with salaries, fringing costs, our commitments to maintaining a fund balance. We've had conversations, but have not made any commitments on what we want to do with taxes. Are we willing to go up in percentages, dollars, millage rates? something of that nature. And then decision on radio tower project borrowing. We're very much walking down the road towards the radio tower project. It's identified as something that we very much need, but doing the final decision on, yes, we're going to do this, this is the financial impact, has to be accompanied as well. It would be important for us too to also have an understanding of what other counties are doing. We have some of that laid out in broad strokes with comparisons and how much debt levy we have per capita, how much operations levy do we have per capita provided to us through state analytics, but also reaching out to our neighbors perhaps and understanding, where are you at with your different revenues, expenditures, services that you have, to kind of put it in perspective on what we're doing here is appropriate. Challenges, the different challenges that we are going to encounter as we try to make changes could be immediate threats that we know are, lingering liabilities, things that we know that we've been putting off, no later than dates to address issues, say like a radio tower project. There's limitations and constraints by statutes, by collective bargaining agreements that we'll have to manage through. There's dependency and culturally established expectations on services and the role of the county in providing those. There's relationships, interested in personal lives and historic promises to partners. We have the battle between utilitarianism and Rawls philosophy with a lot of our different decisions that we make, and that's kind of what is the best for the most versus what is a good idea for those most in need. And avoiding practices, of course, of associating blame as a means of resisting problem solving. And I'm a victim of that, as I'd like to point at the state for mandating it and not funding it, and that types of things are going to be challenges that we're going to have to overcome. We will. Options and levers, then having a section on there kind of dedicated again to understanding our current position, assuming more debt with long-term borrowing, what it would look like if we have more short-term borrowing, understanding bond ratings and how we find notes and buyers. And we'll have Carol involved with that to help us better define and understand that. We then will have kind of also our operations, our levers with operations. As I've learned, we can borrow for operation notes. It kind of puts a little bit of a black eye on your EMA report, though. It kind of says that we're not kind of playing by the rules, essentially, but there is a way to borrow for notes for operations, operational referendums, understanding how that works, pushing our remaining equipment into short-term borrowing to free up more operational levy, reducing non-mandated expenditures, et cetera, et cetera. You see the different lists there. So that would encompass then kind of what is our current financial situation, is then we approach how we're going to solve it. And I'll maybe pause right there to see if there's any concerns on what I envision for the financial report. Moving along then into the execution, this is kind of the execution and the actual plan development. Really focused on what is the outcome and the recommendation of having the documents lined up, having potential commitments by resolutions, which we'll take a look at after this document, understanding the different methods of how we're going to be addressing them, whether it's through a status quo type of an initiative, or there's going to be, and this methods of addressing is kind of what I envision on how the county board is going to tell the finance and personnel committee and the administrator to go forward. And it can be, figure this out year by year, which is the status quo essentially, where, well, you have these limits, figure it out every year. We don't necessarily know, where we don't want to err on trying to guess what the future looks like. So we're going to hope for the best and all those types of things, and just play it year by year. There may be a more detailed kind of approach to it of, no, you know what, we're going to stop this at this point in time. We're going to stop this at this point in time. We're going to stop this at this point in time. We're going to put it all in one kind of a resolution package, and we're going to make the decision right at the front end, kind of a one swoop, if you will. Or I visualize where it might be more of a combination, where we decide on some things we're going to make stances on immediately in the near future and define those times and places. But then it might be more of a combination of saying administrator and finance, rather than saying exactly what's going to stay, what's going to go, what's going to be extended. We want you to work through the next so many years then on a percentage increase or decrease to these types of functions and services. So there's kind of several different ways in which I see the county board can arrive at giving guidance, whether it's through fall swoops of this shall be done at this time versus you figure out a percentage or a dollar amount to reduce annually. The concept then, the different phases, timeline is in work yet. I've got a brief one here that we'll review again. The paths on the decisions as well, visualize most things coming back through this body, much like we did with operations. The scheme of the movement then is we'll be working with the different departments. The actual operation order that I'd like the county board to also approve on kind of also then kind of gives a list of what is going to be analyzed, which in my opinion should be kind of everything, listing out the mandated and non-mandated services. Coordinating instructions then is kind of just that we're working with departments and understanding their expenditures and revenues, their capital and capital plans, much like we did with the operational levies, or I'm sorry, with the operations budget. At this point, I envision kind of having the conversations here with you at Finance and Personnel versus with individual supervisory committees, and kind of having the conversation here and inviting committee members to be able to attend and listen into those types of meetings. With the decision, or with the timeline too, defining kind of where the decision points are and having them kind of defined by dates, as there's many different pieces and decisions that have to be built into this reference timeline. And then the other part of it too is going to be the expectation management part of it. Understanding that this group of folks here and myself, we're not going to be able to manage all the different scenarios on if we pull this lever and reduce this or extend this, what are all the different ramifications? At some point, it's going to have to be a little bit of, you know, we can do what we can do, and that's turning up dials and turning down dials to balance a budget. Again, the more time we give our departments and our partners and our constituents to respond to that is a benefit to us. If you want to dial down administration, if we know that a few years in advance, we can kind of plan for that. If we want to dial down whatever, an ambulance or economic development, or we want to dial down all of our non-mandated ones, if you will, the more time we give in advance of knowing that, the more time that we're going to have the community and departments be able to respond to, either be able to provide the services in a different manner or to be able to find other solutions for where funding is going to come from. There'll be a section on sustainment, understanding that we're trying to use Arpa funds, as I've floated a couple times, hopefully for ambulance survey study, and the intent of that is to assess what it would look like to have ambulance potentially operating as their own, but also assessing the feasibility of that in today's environment, envisioning also like an effort with fairgrounds on how we best utilize that to try to reach a solvent business plan. There's ARPA funds available to seed and separate potentially if we have different functions that we want to say, you know, it's been, appreciate all the services, but at this point we don't feel like this is going to be something that we're going to continue funding out of tax levy operations. We're going to say this is the date and time. Here's some funds to get you nestled and off on your own. Again, all different types of options. Also including in information like other revenues that we do know are coming in, energy credits, an infrastructure bill that was passed, that it's going to help us with our roads, housing block grant funds that we are going to be reappropriating, opiate settlements, sections of understanding that. The command and control then again kind of hits again on what the expectations of what the plan is going to look like. It will be a financial summary, which will capture the items we talked about on top, a forecasted capital improvement plan, which is going to spread out 5 years for big projects with a focus on, 10 years for big projects with a focus on 5 years for our more immediate needs. A financial plan that's going to be focused again more on probably 5 years with some understandings that there might need to be a 10-year plan for operational expenses. I'm thinking associated with like if a dispatch, if we need to move a dispatch out from a jail and we want to plan for a new justice center, then we have to also though consider what it's going to be to add 6-7 dispatchers. Everybody's head full. We good? Up and down? Okay, we're going to keep going. 2023, and then finally, then we're going to hit, what the appropriation guidance is going to be for each year, and if we get to a point then too where we have resolutions of notifications saying at this time and point, this service, we need you to be solvent, or we're going to take actions, or if it's even so far as saying at this point in time, this is no longer going to be a county function, those will be other resolutions to follow. The next document that I have here to show with you then is the timeline. It matches what we, I think, took action to accept last month. This is, again, the broad one. It will be boiled down to look like your operations timeline that we did last time, in which it'll be categorized and broken down with the different dates, kind of a checkbox matrix to follow through. And that's on B. C, I do not have a draft that's clean enough to look at for the capital projects. I will bring that to you next month. But I do want to open up the financial decision worksheet. That should be, I believe, E. Nope, I'm sorry, D. D, 09D. And so this document should look familiar to you. Want me to pull it up on the screen? Everybody good with their tablets? Okay. This is kind of the same decision matrix format that we used for operations last year, but essentially a top section, we're looking to forecast our expenditure assumptions and commitments, and kind of putting that in context to where we're at right now. So these expenditures kind of get to a simplification of how the gap is going to expand, or at least how we visualize it expanding at the status quo. And then we have our forecasted revenue assumptions and impacts if we have different sustainable revenues, and not unlike an ARPA or a opioid settlement, which we know are kind of these one type of things, but sustainable revenue changes or increases, say like energy credits that are going to come from our solar field, we have a section to capture that. With that, then too, we can estimate what our gap is going to be for each financial year going forward in an operational sense. And then we kind of hit the, for better word, the block or the table, what's on the table, and break it then down by department. Understand again what the department, the description of the proposed action, if it's an example addition to expenditures, and we have a funding need. Understand a brief statement of what the impacts on services are, and then what year it's anticipated to fall in. That all gets laid out to the right. Then I just got all the different kind of placeholders right there by departments. The bottom of the document then, which is black font on very dark gray border. Good job, Clint. Kind of talks then on the different levers that we can play with revenues, understanding our tax deed sales tax, income, interest. It still captures those in our ability to try to balance our budgets if we do have, again, more levers to pull for revenues. And then the idea then is for each year, we're going to be able to kind of visualize then what our gap is going to be, understanding that a lot of things that we add become expounding types of expenses, which need to be multiplied going forward into the future. Is there any questions with the decision worksheet? And the last two documents that I want to share with you then is 09E and 09F. And these are just draft sample example resolutions that then may accompany the final plan. One being for separation and one being for fiscal solvency. But as alluded to earlier when we were going through the operation order, they're kind of laid out to say, this is the situation the county's in, therefore be it resolved at this point in time, you're going to be given this much money to figure out how to come up with a solvent plan to be put in place. Otherwise, the administrator will take actions with the supervisory committee to kind of liquidate the operation and redisperse things in the best interest of the county, or a notice of, at this point in time, we're going to be discontinuing these types of services. There may be monies available for you to help get you seated and set to try to continue operations underneath a different legal entity or not. Mr. Chair.
Okay, comments or questions from the committee? Mr. Brewer.
Wow. You said a lot, Administrator Langrick. There are a lot to be considered.
There's a lot of pieces. It's a very complex problem. And again, not to sound, not to try to diminish expectations on trying to solve the problems, but I can't say it enough that we're going to have to stay focused on understanding the things that we can control. That's namely, we can turn monies up, we can turn monies down, we can add people, we can take people away, we can change some parts of policies and try to integrate in advance. But unfortunately, I don't know if we're going to be able to solve all the problems as we look forward and trying to keep the keep all services going. So,
In other words, this is the end of hand kicking, perhaps.
I think it's going to be. I don't want to be so bold to say that we're going to be in a position where we're going to be able to say this ends, this ends, this ends. But I think it's going to be able to get everything in view at the first end, so we really can say, okay, this is what it looks like if we don't make some changes. This line is going up at a exorbitant rate higher than this one, and we're heading kind of for a financial cliff. And not to over exaggerate, that we're heading into uncomfortable financial positions. It's going to make that clear and evident, and it is going to put us in a position now where we're going to have conversations that are going to be unpleasant with deciding what's a priority, what's not, and that's not just the operational aspect. It's also understanding what we can do with keeping up with our infrastructure, and can we responsibly keep up with all of our buildings, with all of our equipments, with our IT infrastructure. It's going to be an effort to put it all out there, but put it all out there in the same conversation. You know, the same table, the same block, so that it's you folks know it's all too easy when you consider each thing in its own little meeting. It is all very, very important, but what is the most important?
Yeah, Ms. Jones?
I agree with this report. The only thing is, I don't think you should use the word blame. I think just as we had that earlier report from Supervisor Sean Murphy, we do need to understand the underlying reasons for why things are happening. And therefore, sometimes we can explain it to people, or we can figure out what we need to do. I didn't like the word blame on that.
Understandable. Your point is noted.
Where did you get the idea to do a financial plan? Did you see an example somewhere, or is this just, did we inspire you with our,
we've had this
situation?
we've been at this now for almost 2 years. It's been taking notes and understanding the things that we've been talking about. The other parts of it has been looking through other counties' annual budgets and the different talking points that they go through, different elements that they add to their annual budget to, again, understand what the picture of things are. And then their experiences of talking with our folks and our staff on how are we going to arrive at this and how are we going to make the decisions. So it's not just me, it's all of you folks.
Thank you. That's great.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Mr. Turk?
First of all, I want to commend Administrator Langrick for, as I recall discussions in the past, this is what we hired him to do. This is something we saw coming that we were really struggling with as a board, and we need a framework to help us make the difficult decisions and have the difficult discussions that we all know are coming. It's a little bit head spinning for a Friday afternoon, but very important, and I'm very thankful that we'll have this tool at our disposal as we start to consider, what are some very difficult things coming in the next several years.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I will say, I know that we've been kind of posturing through like strategic planning on trying it to be like a 10-year plan. But again, too, not to sound like a person of diminished expectations, but in kind of trying to work through of it, I think it's going to be more of value for us to view closer at 5 years, but bigger items, again, keep on the radar for a 10-year assessment, like knowing about our jail situation, knowing about when our bonding ends. But I think we'll get more out of a focus on 5 versus an estimate on 10.
Okay, well, I don't hear anyone else, so thank you for that presentation, Mr. Langrick, and let's move on to agenda item number 12, future agenda items. Mr. Turk, do you have any?
Nothing to follow that topic.
Okay. Mr. C.
I'm fine, thank you, Mr. Langrick.
Okay, Ms. Luck, are you still on meeting?
Yeah, I'm here.
Do you have any?
I don't have any future agenda items, but I will say thank you very much to Administrator Langrick. That was outstanding and exactly what we were looking for. So, and need, even though, yes, you're right, on a Friday, that is a lot to digest.
Okay, Mr. Brewer.
No, nothing further.
Ms. Gentis?
No, and I think it'll be great. They'll see if I sleep tonight and think about it.
You'll be up late night thinking about our 10-year financial plan, right?
I'm serious.
Okay, so with that takes us to agenda item number 13. And I'm looking for a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, February 1st at 1 p.m.
I'll make that motion. I think you sent out a list of all the dates we're meeting. Are we always meeting on the third Friday too?
Yeah, the first Tuesday of the month and the third Friday of
And
the
we
month.
should always count on that, right?
I think so. We did skip 1 month at the end of last year
Yeah,
for the
that's what I
third
just
Friday.
wanted to know for my own planning.
Yeah, just go ahead and plan for both of those for the time being. We'll see what happens. I mean, after we reorganize.
Yeah.
You know,
So I
next
won't
term.
be on television.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I made that motion.
Oh, motion by Gentis, sorry.
I'll second that motion and hoping that everyone is feeling much better by the next meeting.
Yes, that would be great. Second by Seep. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thanks for your time, everyone. Really appreciate it.
That's great.
It's a